Substantiate, to establish by proof or competent evidence. Welcome back to Substantiate. I'm the host, William Glasser, bringing you hypothetical sports matchups every single week. All right, everyone, we are back. Another Wednesday, another episode, the second part of Redemption Bracket. These are the teams that didn't win, and we're going to be giving one of them a gold medal today. And we did the first two games in the first half of this episode last week. Then we're doing the second two of the first round today. And then the semifinals and finals are a tad bit quicker because we didn't need to add more context to the teams because we already explained that in the first round. So, as a recap, last week, the Seattle Supersonics, the first team they beat was the 2001 Seattle Mariners, and that was the 1995-96 Supersonics. Then, in the second game, the 2001 Dallas Mavericks lost to the 2014 Seattle Seahawks. So that's what happened last week. Go check out Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at SubstantiatePod. You know the drill. And yeah, so this episode, second part of a great conversation with Michael Walters from the Flex Network. You can find all of his links, all of my links, down in the show notes. Go do that. And without wasting much more time, let's get back to the second part of my conversation with Michael Walters. Let's move on to game number 3, which is going to be the 1990 to 1993 Buffalo Bills went to the Super Bowl, lost all 4 in a row, versus the 2007 New England Patriots, who lose to the Giants. All right, so these Buffalo Bills teams, they lose 4 Super Bowls in a row, which is not very probable and made Buffalo Bills fans crazy. The New England Patriots 2007, great team. They make it to the playoffs and they gave up the helmet catch. So neither story has a happy ending. Well, I guess you could argue the Patriots do, because then they went on and beat the Seahawks in 2014. And anyway, you get the point. But so what was a little bit about this Buffalo Bills team that made them worthy to come on this list?
So one thing for me was that the Buffalo Bills in those years, you had Jim Kelly at quarterback, you had Andre Reed at receiver. They were untouchable. They could score at will on anybody. And if anyone stepped up and thought that they could stop them, they were wrong. I mean, you don't know because you're younger, but and even for me, like in the 90s, I was born in 88. So I wasn't even, I was 2, 3, 4 years old, whatever. But, I eventually watched those games growing up and stuff. But Jim Kelly and Reed were unstoppable. They were such a good 1-2 punch. They were scoring on anybody at will. Like, think about any good player right now that has a quarterback that has a great connection with his receiver, right? For me, I think about Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett. I think they have a great connection, right? You might look at Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. They have a great connection. And I'm sure all these other players and stuff or fans of teams can name the connection that they have with these other teams, but they're unstoppable. And to think that they could go to 4 straight Super Bowls and at minimum not get at least one is just mind-boggling, right? You can't have a 25% success rate, out of 4 opportunities, you can't get at least one. And it's just crazy. They just ran into some teams, and some good teams. And so it's just really unfortunate. And so that's why I put the Bills on the list.
Yeah, and obviously there was the wide right ending to the Super Bowl. I think that was the 91 Super Bowl.
Right.
But as a Giants fan, wide right, that was always a great one. But yeah, I mean the Bills partially unlucky, but I mean 4 Super Bowls in a row. You can't show up to 4 Super Bowls and lose each of them. All right, so now I know we talked a little bit about the Patriots towards the beginning, and I just mentioned the helmet catch, David Tyree, and obviously Tom Brady is here. So any team that Tom Brady is on, obviously there's the saying, don't bet against Brady. So, but for this team, if the Patriots won 6 Super Bowls with Brady, excuse me, then what makes the Patriots redemption worthy if they got that redemption?
They did get the redemption, but they never got it against the Giants.
In fact, they lost the second time.
Exactly. So, and the second time they were actually dangerously close to. If you remember, the last play of that game was I don't remember if it was a Hail Mary or what it was, but it was a pass into the end zone that was tipped, and Gronkowski almost made a diving catch on it. He was very close to it, which I'm sure gave a lot of Giants fans like mini heart attacks because they were like, of course, the Patriot. But it was one of those things, I've always said this. I felt like Jason Garrett as a coach for the Cowboys always had a formula and a way to beat the Seahawks.
Quick editing note here. Jason Garrett also beat the Seahawks in 2020 as the offensive coordinator with the Giants.
And in the same way, I've always thought that Tom Coughlin had a formula and a way to beat the Patriots. And both have seemed to be true over time. And really just looking back at it now, you see like the Seahawks lost to the Giants this last year. It's just one of those things where some guys have advantages against other coaches. They just know what their kind of mindset is or game plan, and they know how to beat it. For whatever reason, Bill Belichick just could not get past Tom Coughlin and the Giants. And they showed up every time, specifically 2 Super Bowls I can remember. And I couldn't be more happy that the Giants won both of those Super Bowls, just because if you've seen the Patriots play and you're not from the Boston area, you were probably rooting against them.
One more quick editing note here. I'm pretty sure recently Brady was asked if he would take the deal where if he was to trade in 2 of his Super Bowl rings to get back that win against the Giants in the 2007 to 08 Super Bowl, and he said yes. So that one really meant a lot to Brady, and he lost. He could never get past the Giants, and his only other Super Bowl loss was to the Eagles in, what was that, like 2018? So this one sticks out to Brady. Yeah, I mean, like you see the memes where it's like fan demographics in the NFL. There's one small dot in Massachusetts and New England, that's Patriots, and the other 99.9% of the country is everything except the Patriots are rooting against the Patriots. So yeah, I mean, it was just so hard to root for the Patriots, and for some reason, Tom Brady being on the Bucs and winning a Super Bowl with the Bucs, it was easier to root for him. Not sure why, but it was.
I think what it was is because Belichick wasn't there, and then it was kind of like it was one of those situations where it's like we didn't expect him to win. A lot of people thought, oh, they're going to be good, but are they really going to win? They're like, he's going to the Buccaneers. What do you mean? They haven't really been relevant for a while, and they actually had a pretty long playoffs drought before all this happened. Yeah. And then they made the playoffs as a wild card team. So it's not even like they won their division. They kind of got manhandled by the Saints in the regular season.
And then came back to beat them.
Yeah, but week 1, they got beat up pretty good by the Saints. And so for a lot of people, it was kind of like, I think with Tampa Bay, Tom Brady really cemented his legacy as like kind of the GOAT. You're like, okay, we get it now. It's not the system with Belichick. Because what do you think about when you see Tom Brady? Because what I think about is I think about Tom Brady being down, him sitting on the bench with his head down, looking at the ground, not looking at any playbook or anything. And in that moment, I know, okay, we're all if you're a fan of the team that Tom Brady's playing against and his head is looking at the ground, you're in trouble. It's game over now. He's went into another gear, you know. So
All right. So now this is, I mean, I have a certain input here that I'll put in, but first I want to hear your thoughts about who you think should advance here, Buffalo or New England.
I have a feeling that you're probably going with Buffalo just because New England had a little bit of a redemption story, and
Yeah.
I kind of side with that because I feel bad for Buffalo as well because it's like, man, you went to 4 straight and you can't get one, you know. And so yeah, that's where I fall on it. So looks like we're on to round 2 now, huh?
Nope, we got one more, Houston versus
Oh,
Michigan.
right.
So this one will be a bit of a quicker one because
Yeah.
we'll just go pretty quick into the second round, see some semifinals action. So Houston Cougars basketball 82 to 84, Michigan Fab 5 91 to 93. So each of these teams, they each had star players. The Fab Five for Michigan, obviously, and in Hakeem Olajuwon, Michael Young, and Clyde Drexler for Houston. Each had fairly deep lineups, but with these two teams, who has? Well, we'll keep on the line of redemption. Who came the closest and would have had the best redemption story? Because each of these teams were more than 1 year.
So with the Fab Five, I feel a little bit different about it just because they kind of fell into like the superstar status, right? Because
Yeah.
if you were one of those guys that was in the Fab Five, you were constantly in the newspaper, you were on any, I guess it wasn't website at the time because it was a while back, but if you were to kind of translate it in today's world, you would be on every website, you would be on everyone's Twitter feed, you would be on everything, right? But they were talking about those guys like crazy. They were in every type of media outlet that you can get in, right? And so you can't help but wonder, hey, did they start to get a little bit full of themselves? Did they start to believe the hype? And I think what eventually kind of led to their downfall, they, for whatever reason, if there's actually a Fab Five documentary, I believe it's on Netflix. You could watch that, and it's about Michigan basketball, the Fab Five. You know, Chris Webber, Jawan Howard, Jalen Rose,
Yep.
all those guys. So you could learn about those guys, right? But man, did they? I don't know what's more disappointing between them and the 82 to 84 Houston Cougars, just because the Cougars really had Akeem Olajuwon, and if you reflect back on Akeem Olajuwon's career, you're like, no one dunked on that dude except for Michael Jordan. Like, he was unstoppable in the paint. You couldn't get shots off if he was within arm's reach, which is kind of funny because his arms were so long. I felt like the whole court was arm's reach, but there's a lot of guys that just that couldn't get anything on him, you know? And so he was just very difficult to deal with. But right now, if I was going to give the nod, man, this one's tough. If I was going to give the nod to a team, I would have to give it to Fab Five. I think they were probably in that world where if it was today's world, there would be someone in their ear saying, hey, stop looking at the articles, stop looking at Twitter, stop looking at the internet, all that stuff, you know? I would hope so, at least. Yeah, Houston just had no business really. If that 82 to 84 Houston team were to play against the 91 to 93 Michigan team, I think the Michigan team would win. That's my personal opinion. So don't get mad at me if you disagree.
Oh yeah, no. I'm a Michigan fan also. Tough loss to UCLA last night.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I agree with the Fab Five. I mean, they're called the Fab Five because all five starters were great, and at the same time, none of them turned out to be NBA legends. But we're not talking about them when they were in the NBA, with the exception of Juwan Howard on the Mavericks. But anyway, so I think that the Fab Five is a good pick. And so now, before we get into the second round, I want to tell you about a protein bar that I've really been enjoying eating lately. And this is Built Bar. These bars are high protein, high fiber, low calorie, low sugar, and low carbs. And they're covered in 100% chocolate. These bars are delicious. And unlike other protein bars, they don't have a bad aftertaste or anything. They have so many different flavors, from mint brownie and raspberry cheesecake, salted caramel, cookies and cream, and there's so many more. They have nut and non-nut varieties. And if you use code Substantiate, then you'll save yourself 10% off your next order. And I promise you, these are delicious bars. And you can find a link to that in the show notes if you would like, or you can go to builtbar.com. Anyway, back to the bracket here. So we have, going into the semifinals, the Sonics versus the Bills, and the Fab Five versus the Seahawks. So going back to it, I guess we'll go to Sonics, Bills. Now, obviously, we've given context and background and backstories to these teams already. So we're just going to jump straight into who you think should advance and why.
First of all, on a side note, I'm a CrossFitter, right? So those protein bars,
Oh, yeah.
I'm all the way in on the protein bars, just so you know that. I consume as much protein as I possibly can in a 24-hour period. So I'm all the way in on that. But on this topic, Sonics versus Buffalo, this one's hard. I think you know where I'm going. I'm gonna go with the 95-96 Sonics because I personally believe that they're the best team that has never won a championship in the history of all sports. That's just kind of how I feel about that. Buffalo, for whatever reason, when you go to 4 straight and you can't get at least one, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I just feel
they don't deserve to go on.
Well,
they had the opportunities and they couldn't pull through. I mean, the Sonics playing against Michael Jordan, like, okay, they've played against Michael Jordan. They lost to the GOAT. Okay. But Buffalo, 4 chances in a row against different teams. And eventually you just got to step up and pull through, for crying out loud. How many teams would die to go to the Super Bowl for 4 times and come up empty 4 times? I just think that here I agree. And the Sonics are just much more deserving of moving on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously gonna have my like hometown bias, but at the same time, I'm like, dude, you can't get one. Come on,
yeah,
And so the Sonics have actually won an NBA championship. They won an NBA championship in the early '70s. So they actually proved from a franchise standpoint that they could do it. But I don't know about Buffalo, but yeah, they struggle. Yeah, we'll go ahead and move on to the next matchup we have here.
Yep. So Fab Five versus the Seahawks. And as we just mentioned with Buffalo, being 0 for 4 in 4 consecutive Super Bowls, the Seahawks come out 1-2 after 2 straight Super Bowls. So they're already much better than the Bills in that sense, if you look at just the record. Right. But then there's the Fab Five here. And these 2 completely different sports. One's professional, one was amateur, college versus the pros, in addition to basketball versus football. And each of these teams was special for different reasons. And you can put your input in also. But I'm thinking Fab Five here because, the Seahawks, if you think about it from the perspective of who deserves it more, in a way, in that sense that we've been going on. Like, okay, Michigan was there, right? Those 3 years, 91 to 93. But at the same time, the NCAA tournament, 1 out of 64 teams is coming out happy. So, compared to, say, football, 1 out of now 14. Anyway, but you come out in that sense, and the Seahawks, on top of just winning it the year before, I would definitely want to see the Fab Five come play again. I mean, I would want to see any of these teams play, but but for this one, I think I would lean slightly towards the Fab Five to move on. What about you?
Yeah, what you don't know, William, is kind of the little bit of Seattle inside because you're not a Seattle guy, so you don't get it. But let me tell you a couple things about this 2014 Seahawks team. Um, this team still had a Percy Harvin on it, right? And so, from what I understand, is early in this season, Percy Harvin had been traded to the Buffalo Bills for like almost nothing. And the reason that he was traded is because I think just from a man-to-man thing here is I think Percy Harvin had a lot of insecurities when it came to like being accepted into the wide receiver locker room. He felt like a lot of people were against him, blah blah blah, all that type of stuff, right? And so if you were to look back at the film and stuff like that, you would see that Golden Tate, who was a receiver for the Seahawks, actually played in the Super Bowl with a black eye. And the reason he played in the Super Bowl with a black eye is because he got into a fight with Percy Harvin. And so I'm not saying Percy Harvin kicked his butt or anything, but I am saying that Percy Harvin at least gave him a black eye. And there's also a lot of rumors about Russell Wilson, Golden Tate, all of that stuff, because rumors were that the Golden Tate and Russell Wilson's ex-wife kind of had an unfair, weird type of relationship going on, right? And so there's that to think about as well. And so I think that this is one of those situations that I was talking about earlier with like the Buffalo Bills, where hey, you did more damage to yourself than anyone else could do. And so I think with the 2014 Seattle Seahawks, that they did a little bit of damage to themselves, and that when it came time to game time, they put a lot of it together, but they didn't put all of it together. And so I would also give the nod to the Fab Five in this one, and I would move the Fab Five into the championship against the Sonics.
All right, yeah. And so now that we are here in the finals, these teams have made it all this way. And if we take a quick look back so far, the Sonics, who we pushed past the Seattle Mariners from 01 and the Buffalo Bills from the early 90s, and the Fab Five, who in this case beat the Houston Cougars as well as the 2014 Seahawks. Now, this is a great finals, in my opinion, because this redemption bracket, what we set out to fill here was a team to come back. And I think I said it at the beginning, give a gold medal to someone that didn't win it the first time. You could call this a loser's bracket, but none of these teams are losers because they made it deep into the playoffs or had phenomenal seasons. So here in this finals, we have the Sonics and the Fab Five, and I know who you're leaning to here. You've also said it maybe a round ago. So I'll let you speak for yourself in a minute. But when we think about this, I guess we should still try to keep our rational minds. So what is a case for and against each team?
So for the Sonics, I would still say, like I've said from the beginning, they ran into the GOAT, right? They ran into Michael Jordan, who has this competitive, like almost gene about him, right? Kobe Bryant also possessed that same type of gene, which is where I don't care who you are. I don't care what type of team that you have. It doesn't matter. I'm putting hours in the gym. I'm putting hours on the court. I'm making sure my team is ready. You are not going to beat us, right?
Yeah.
And so we've seen over the years, maybe you haven't seen specifically like growing up, but you have at least watched YouTube or seen videos of Michael Jordan sending all types of teams home.
Well, The Last Dance.
Yeah. Like if you watch the Last Dance documentary, Michael Jordan sent teams home, all while dealing with drama on his own franchise's side, right? And so I often consider Michael Jordan the GOAT of multiple, not the GOAT of like multiple sports, but like his ranking as the GOAT being higher than the GOAT of other sports, just because he won. Like, okay, so we talk about Michael Jordan winning 6 rings, right? Which isn't the most of all time because Bill Russell won a bunch. But as far as being impactful in the way that he was, being a cultural icon in the way that he is, and still is to this day. Like the Jordan shoes alone are still some of the most coveted shoes in the world. You take all those things into account. And so, like, you're really facing the GOAT right now. And then I look at Fab Five and I say, you guys were so good from the beginning. Like, there's no question about it. And as things, if you're a Michigan fan, as things go and they're kind of going from step one to step two to step three, it's like, man, like how I talked about the 2001 Mariners in the beginning. It was just, if you're a Michigan fan, it was so much fun to watch that team. They were so incredible. Chris Webber could not be, and there was not a soul in NCAA basketball that could line up against Chris Webber and be like, oh, I'm shutting that guy down today. There's no way, because Chris Webber couldn't really even get shut down when he was in the NBA, you know? And so he was just entertaining from start to finish. The Fab Five was entertaining from start to finish. It was just unfortunate the way it ends. But I think the advantage that the Sonics have here is that they got a 7-game series, and with the Fab Five and the way that March Madness is structured, it's one and done. If you lose one game, you're done. But with the NBA, it's like, hey, you got to lose 4. Because if you lose one in the NBA finals, you're like, okay, well, we still got more. So let's figure out what we did and let's come back stronger, you know? And so that could be a case for or against, depending on how you look at it. But that's just kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's called March Madness, not March, the law of large numbers. So
Right.
it's not a 7-game series. It's
Right.
one game, and that's why it's so fun. That's why, even though Michigan lost last night, why it's still fun to watch, because it's unpredictable. Anything can happen. And that falls to their disadvantage, but that falls to every college team's disadvantage here. And I'd have to agree with you on going with the Sonics here, just going up against the GOAT. Like, there's no argument for it there. And but to bring up a counter argument to MJ being the biggest separation for GOAT in his respective sports league, I mean, I would have to go with Wayne Gretzky in hockey.
Oh, yeah, that is tough. I wasn't even factoring him in. So
Yeah, I mean, we
that's
didn't
very
have a
true.
single NHL team on here today. I know I'm not an expert in the
You know
NHL,
what?
but
If I were able to remake this bracket on, or let's say we expanded it to 10 teams as the 10 seed, I would have put in, what was it, that the Vancouver Canucks team that went to the Stanley Cup Finals with, what was his name, Roberto. He was the goalie for the Canucks. They had Daniel and Henrik Sedin. They had the Sedin brothers at the time. They were a great team, but they ran into a Boston Bruins team that had Sedino Chara, who was very young at the time, but Chara is such a monster of a human that, yeah, there's some teams out there that I would definitely put into the mix. Old school Detroit Red Wings teams. There's a lot of man. If I would have even thought of hockey, I probably would have put some hockey teams in there. But there's some hockey teams out there that I would definitely consider.
yeah. Well, anyways, in the meantime, the Seattle Supersonics are our champions today.
Yes.
And if I edit this and post this clip on Instagram, I'll edit that Seattle Supersonics champions onto your hat there.
Oh man, I love that so much. Hold on. Let me tell you something real quick before we shut down here. Just so you know that my Instagram handle, you gotta have it so that you can it's at mbwalters11 on Instagram. Yeah, mbwalters11 on Instagram. So find me there. So if you tag me on there, just make sure that, yeah, nothing makes me happier. If I could wear Seattle Supersonics stuff to work every day, I so would. I mean, but they would probably be like, "Hey, why are you wearing a hat? Why are you wearing sports stuff at work?" And so it's a little bit different atmosphere, but yeah, that's cool. And William, of course, thank you for having me on the podcast. I had such a fun time, and I'll have to return the favor once the NFL season starts and get you on there and talk about the Giants a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first of all, thanks. I know we connected on Clubhouse. We hosted
Right,
a Clubhouse room, not a large turnout, but strong
right,
but mighty. It
right.
was a fun time talking. But Yeah, I'd love to go on, and thanks again for reaching out again and coming on today and helping to create this whole bracket. It was great. You got a championship out of it for your team.
Yeah, we need it because we're not even a team currently. We were shipped off to Oklahoma City, so Seattle's in the middle of kind of trying to get their team back. They built a stadium, all that good stuff. So they're trying to figure it out. So they got an NHL team, the
Seattle Kraken.
yeah, the Seattle Kraken. That'll be cool once that gets going. I'm gonna fly back to Seattle for that whenever they start selling tickets and stuff. So that'll be really cool. But man, I appreciate you having me on, and I'll come back anytime. Just give me a holler.
Yep. And to find links to everything with Michael, just scroll down to the show notes. Instagram is can be found there. The Flex Network can be found there. Everything can be found there. So thanks again for coming on, Michael. Have a great evening.
All right, man. You too. Thank you.
All right. I hope you liked that episode. And the Seattle Supersonics come out on top. The number one seed, although we didn't really seed them in any order, comes out on top, beating the Fab Five. And I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, if you could do a couple things for me. Number one, if you're listening in Apple Podcasts, if you could go click on the podcast's page and give us a 5-star rating, and if you can, write a nice review. And the second thing is to share this with someone, whether it's sharing it in a text or on social media or emailing someone. Go share it with someone. And now is literally the best time ever in the existence of this podcast to go share it with someone. All right, this is the 16th episode of season 2 of the podcast. We had 11 in season 1. 11 plus 16, that's 27. So you can go tell someone about this, and they have 27 full episodes to come and listen to and catch up on, because all of this content, all these hypothetical matchups, they're relevant at any point in time. That's the beauty of them. So you can go tell them we've got more episodes coming. We're going full steam ahead, about to record an episode this weekend, which by the time you're listening to this is last weekend, and the content's just going to keep coming out. So again, share this podcast, give us a rating and a review, and of course, our social medias. So big things to come, and thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to this episode of Substantiate. The best way to help support the show is to, number one, tell your friends about Substantiate. That is the number one way to support us. The second way is to leave us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. Number 3, follow us at SubstantiatePod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Hello, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
And we're hosts of Capes on the Couch, the podcast where comics get counseling.
Superheroes don't always get to go home happy. That's where we come in.
We offer psychiatric and mental health analysis of comic book characters.
So check us out at capesonthecouch.live and across all social media platforms at Capes on the Couch.